It may have taken a year and a half, but the 2023 remake of Resident Evil 4 is now on GeForce NOW. Capcom has given the green light to NVIDIA to host the adventures of Leon Scott Kennedy, allowing the tech juggernaut to finally show us what NVIDIA tech can do with this game. Resident Evil 4's remake was a Game of the Year contender and a flagship title of 2023. Still impressive now in 2024? Let's see how Resident Evil 4 runs on GeForce NOW. It took us a minute to get from the GeForce NOW menu to the Resident Evil 4 menu. Connection stability is important. In over 5 hours of my gameplay testing, I had no issues with latency, and I stayed near 20 milliseconds the entire time. Mouse and keyboard and controller options both worked flawlessly across all tiers. As usual, GeForce NOW has no issues with the controls or latency. Without a benchmark feature, I opted to use the same tests for graphical performance as I did when I tried it out on Shadow and Boostroid last year. I'm going to run through the intro area and then get into a huge fight in the village square, and see how things perform with both default and maxed out graphics. Ray tracing is available, but in this case I don't think it's necessary. Capcom takes a lot of care in their lighting engine. They know very well that darkness and shadows are key to the gloomy atmosphere that survival horror games thrive in. Something so important to the theme could not be dependent on whether or not a player has access to ray tracing tech. In fact, the low RTX settings are even less resource intensive than none according to the game itself. But we'll turn them all the way up when we do max settings tests. Starting with priority, we'll let the game run through the default settings and see if we have any performance dips. FSR 2 is enabled. That's going to scale it up times 4 from a 960 by 540 up to the proper 1920 by 1080 image. This tier runs at a maximum of 60 frames per second. That's going to be our target. We're looking for consistency without lag spikes or graphical dips. 59. That's our low point. The default settings are perfectly stable. The game looks good and plays flawlessly. If you want performance, this is it. It's set up without you having to do anything. I do feel like the scaling technology is smearing our visuals a bit, especially in comparison to our next tests, but you can be the judge. Let's turn off FSR and mess with the settings until the menu estimation starts complaining at us. 51. Starting to see a little bit of performance drop, but still respectable. So if you want a bit more depth to your visuals, you can sacrifice some FPS for that eye candy. Alright, time to be difficult. We're going to turn all these knobs to the max. And our new low is 42 frames per second. So with settings unreasonably maxed out, we will get performance drops just walking through the woods. Keep in mind the textures have no reason to be this detailed while we're running a 1080 resolution. So I'm just forcing onerous labor onto the hardware. But enough with the 1080 gameplay. We're going 4K. The default settings are crisp and detailed, with room to go higher or lower. There's some resolution scaling with FSR set to performance. We are doing the same times 4 scaling. We're moving a 1920 by 1080 up to 4K with this setting on. Most of the time we're straddling that 120 FPS area of perfection, but with FPS dips during action and combat. On default settings, this hit a low point in the upper 70s, especially with a lot of gore and models running about. This number's not flawless, but it's absolutely better than anything you're going to get on a console with this title. You can get better performance if you drop the settings further, if that 120 FPS is more important to you than the crispy visuals. Their default settings fit my preferences nicely. Ultimate can also handle unreasonable settings if you want to try it. If I jack all these settings up to maximum, our FPS can drop even under 60, though not by much. All in all, maxing everything out tanks performance to around 70% of the original default settings at the FPS rate, and I imagine this is probably going to get worse later on, when there's larger and more complex boss models and areas with a lot of intricate background environments. Now I've said it last year when I was testing other cloud devices, but even with some powerful features to use, I don't find it necessary to turn all the settings to maximum to get what I want out of this game. Lower settings still look good. Check out these shadows. That being said, the default on Ultimate is noticeably crisper than anything on Priority, especially when FSR is smearing the Priority's visuals. I recommend the default settings on both tiers because I tend to favor performance at or above 60, but the game is playable either way. It feels like the in-game estimates of performance provided in the graphics menu are fairly accurate for keeping your performance at a steady and reliable rate. If you like the stability like me, feel free to tweak your settings however you like. Just stay out of the orange or red, you'll be fine. I generally dislike using too much FSR or motion blur, so those are the only changes I might make for my personal play. The verdict is recommended. GeForce NOW made good use of the time it took to get permission to host Resident Evil 4. The experience is great across the board, and you can't go wrong playing this masterpiece on NVIDIA's powerhouse cloud service. If you have a 4K monitor, Ultimate's definitely the way to go, but you're going to have fun either way. I really have no complaints outside of the fact that it took 19 months to get the service. What I have to give NVIDIA credit for, and what makes their service so incredibly successful and appealing to people beyond the name recognition, is this: easy access to a working product. With a few menu choices, you're connected, the settings are already set for optimal performance, and you just play. You don't have to install anything, you don't need to tweak settings, you don't have hiccups in the service, no issues with control. This is what a customer of any technology, especially cloud, needs in 2024. Minimum user effort. Whether we have 20 minutes to play or several hours, we don't want to waste any of that time fixing something. We want it to work immediately and seamlessly with our hardware. This simple concept is why NVIDIA and Boostroid are crushing all the PC rental competition with their pick-up and play models, and why GeForce NOW is considered such a top-tier successful product. Keep the games coming and keep them polished on release, and cloud will continue to expand and gain ground in the public consciousness. I hope you enjoyed this review of Resident Evil 4 on GeForce NOW. Let us know in the comments below if you'd like to see an updated comparison of the services since the Ultra upgrade was added to Boostroid, or let us know if there's other titles and comparisons you'd like to see. We got you covered on all the latest news, reviews, speculation, and more when it comes to the cloud. Like, share, subscribe, you know the drill. Keep it locked right here to the only place you can do battle in gaming heaven, Cloud Gaming Battle. I'm LittleQuick. I'll see you next time. Don't forget to shut the door on the way out.